Hi everyone, my name is Lauren and I am from the Student Learning Support Service, and in this video we are going to talk about literature reviews. We're going to talk a little bit about an overview of what a literature review is and why we write them. Then we'll talk about the aims of a literature review, some of the most common forms of literature review, some brief tips for conducting and organising your research, and how this translates into the structure of a review. Now, it should be said before we begin that literature reviews can be very complex, especially if you're studying at a higher level like a master's or a PhD. So remember, this is just a starting point. We're just going to look at that we're going to outline some of the main skills that you'll need and considerations that you might want to take when setting out to write a literature review. So in basic terms, a literature review is about showing a reader what is currently known and thought about a particular topic. It aims to show the major findings, theories, and advances of research, compare, contrast, and evaluate the main themes and maybe methods of that research, and show the strengths and weaknesses of what has been done, and show where there might be any gaps in knowledge. Really, a literature review is a critical evaluation, and as such, it synthesizes or draws together various academic books or articles. You might be familiar with literature reviews from reading academic articles. They usually appear in the introduction of an article or as an early section of a paper, and they function to give the reader the background of a topic and justify and contextualize the author's research. It's also different when you're writing your own literature review. Now, because there are a number of reasons that we might write a literature review, there are also a number of different forms that a literature review at university might take. Much like in an academic journal article, a literature review might form part of an introduction or an early section of a paper that you're writing. A literature review might also be a standalone assignment that requires you to demonstrate your knowledge of a topic and your research and critical evaluation skills in order to compare and contrast the main findings about a topic. Or it might be the most complex type of literature review at all, which is that which appears in something like a master's or a PhD thesis or a large research project. This type of literature aims to provide a really comprehensive overview of a topic in order to contextualize and justify the aims of your research. Importantly though, no matter what type you are writing, a literature review is not simply a summary of individual articles. That's probably an annotated bibliography is where we do that. It's also not merely a description of the literature that you found. It is a critical synthesis. I will talk more about what this means in a moment. Now, a good literature review is comprehensive, and as such, it requires a lot of research. And to do this well, you'll need to be systematic in your approach and enter into your research with a plan. And this is going to help you because this will then help you structure the literature review when you actually come to write it. So firstly, think about what your research question is really asking you. Use the content words to form and collect search terms. Then brainstorm synonyms to develop a more comprehensive list of words that you might look for through Find It at Flinders, Google Scholar, or importantly, discipline-specific databases. Next, consider the scope and limitations of your research. So what do you actually need to cover, and what is beyond what you can reasonably achieve within your particular type of literature review? You should also consider the relevance of the source to your research, okay? So that means thinking about whether or not the topic and the aims of the research are relevant, whether it's up to date. Generally speaking, this means it was published within the last 5 to 10 years, or whether it's a landmark publication, something really important in your field. It might be a major theory or a major theorist that you're referencing. Where did the research take place, and under what conditions and circumstances? If you're writing about something in an Australian context, you want to think carefully about whether the research is applicable in an Australian context, if it's comparable. It's really a good idea at this point is to check out the library resources on how to conduct good research and how to do all of these things, because there's lots of resources available. So if you don't feel confident, please go and check those out. Now, because you'll probably need to read quite a lot and you'll need to find quite a lot, so you need to be thinking about how it all comes together. So decide how you're going to track what you've found and what therefore you might include as you go. And again, this all depends on the purpose and the research aims. And so there are a few ways that you might go about kind of categorizing and tracking your research. So the first way is by themes. So you might look at identifying the main ideas, concepts, or questions that you keep coming across in different studies. Where do these overlap? Where do they differ? It might be by trends or findings. So looking out for studies that, all kind of come to a similar or quite different conclusions to each other. Or you might consider how findings have changed over time. Pay attention to similarities and differences, particularly where studies disagree with each other. It also might be by theoretical or methodological frameworks. So this means categorizing your research according to the different methods and approaches that various authors have taken to the topic, considering the strengths and weaknesses of each. And last, and really, really importantly, don't forget to keep track of all bibliographic details as you go. You might want to use something like EndNote to help you do this. So next, once you have organized your research, begin to evaluate what you have found. So this is important not only to determine what will be included in your final literature review, but for the discussion in the body of your literature review. And the SLSS, the Student Learning Support Service, we have more comprehensive guides on how to evaluate literature. But as a starting point, here are some really important questions to consider. Okay, so once you have collected and evaluated your searches, you feel like you know what's going to be included and what you're going to set aside, it's time to start actually structuring the review itself. Now, firstly, I highly recommend beginning this process by developing a structural outline. And again, we have guides on how to do that. Start thinking about it in a similar way to how you would think about how you're going to outline something like an essay. But if it is a standalone literature review, it means it has an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. And the aims of these are, again, very similar to an academic essay. So the introduction outlines the review's purpose and its significance. It probably includes the research question or your thesis, the scope and limitations, and the review's organizational structure. It may, especially if this has been asked of you in your assignment task, also include the types of sources used and any criteria for inclusion. Now with the body, this is where having that organizational structure when you were doing the research comes in really handy. Because again, like most pieces of academic writing, the body should be logically organized. You've got to have one major idea per paragraph. With a literature review, you can use headings and subheadings to help you organize the structure of those sections, because it might be 2 or 3 paragraphs per section, and a section might be on a particular theme that you found. And again, this all depends on the length and complexity of your literature review and your assignment guidelines. So remember, no two literature reviews are necessarily going to look the same. But really, the important thing about the body of your literature review is that this is where you synthesize what you have found. And I keep using that word because it's really important when we talk about literature reviews. Synthesizing means both summarizing the main ideas of a paper and comparing and contrasting it with others, or bringing it together with others to show how they kind of fit as a whole. And this might mean discussing their similarities and differences or strengths and weaknesses. Remember, this is not merely a description, okay? It's not just a list. You are drawing multiple sources together to show how they are connected. That even means that you might have multiple citations within a single sentence, okay? That is fine. That's a good thing. So let's have a look at an example. Okay, so you can see how we move from like the topic sentence up the top here, which kind of outlines both what this is talking about, that it's about ELP programs and outcomes for students. And at the same time, it's giving us an idea of what research has been done in this area, what those outcomes have been shown to be. So we've got Mort and Jury, and then we have a bunch of citations for studies that show that this results in higher grades. We then narrow in and specify, focus on the methods of one particular study that was done and what that showed. And then this is compared to a second study immediately afterwards. So we can see the connection between those two. We can see how they talk to each other, and we can see that they, in this case, support one another's conclusions. Now, of course, this is a very, very brief example, okay? It's only a couple of sentences long. This would, of course, continue, and we're going to see much more of this kind of thing as we continue writing the body of our literature review. And then we get to the conclusion, which, again, just like an essay, summarizes the main ideas and findings of the literature review. It includes any major comparisons and differences. And importantly, if it's relevant to the type of literature review that you're writing, it might identify a gap in that knowledge. So what can you see is not present in the research that has been done? Or it might draw out the implications of these findings. So showing the significance of what this research shows us. Why is it important? So remember, a literature review aims to show what is currently known about a particular topic and evaluate how research about that topic has been conducted. Depending on your purpose, there are a few different forms that a literature review might take, but importantly, no matter how long your literature review is or what kind of form it takes, you need to critically evaluate, synthesize, and organize your review. So I hope this has given you a little bit of an overview of how to get started on your literature review. Don't forget to check out some of the other guides and resources that the SLSS have that might help you as you're doing so. Good luck, and I'll see you next time.